The only remaining undefeated team in the country, what do they need to do to keep it that way all the way through the national championship? We're going to go ahead and take a look at Indiana's path through the college football playoffs, and it all starts in the quarterfinals, awaiting the winner of tonight's game between Oklahoma and Alabama. Now, if the Sooners win, I think this will be a more difficult matchup for Indiana because the Sooners have the best defense out of these two teams, very comparable to that defense of Indiana. And offensively, I think the Hoosiers would have a slight advantage. But the main key in this game is because Oklahoma has a very solid defense, don't go away from what's been working all season. Fernando Mendoza won the Heisman Trophy partially because of how well balanced this offense is and how well Indiana runs the football. If they just force him to throw the football, maybe he makes a few more mistakes. You need to keep that balanced offense you've been running all season. If it is Alabama who does beat Oklahoma, which I think is not the most likely scenario, this is much easier for Indiana because Alabama's defense just isn't as good. And I think the Hoosiers can put up a lot more points. Not really as worried about Indiana getting past the Crimson Tide.
This is mostly just going to be about Indiana and what they need to do because you've already proven that you're the best team in the country because you are the last remaining undefeated team. You've beaten the reigning national champion. Now it's just about making sure you keep yourself focused. We saw last year with Oregon after winning the Big Ten title and being the number one team in the country and having that first round bye, they were not ready to play against Ohio State. Granted, I don't think Oklahoma and Alabama are comparable to that Ohio State team from last year, but Indiana's got to come out ready to play. You have to put aside everything that has already happened. Fernando Mendoza's Heisman win, Kurt Cignetti likely being the coach of the year. You have to put all that aside and focus on what's ahead. You're able to do that and stick to your game plan, like Jonah mentioned, getting to that RPO style offense by starting by running the ball, then you're going to be just fine. You're going to have no issues with these teams. So I think there's a very solid chance Indiana moves on. I think Oklahoma can possibly pull off that upset if the offense is able to click just enough and that defense keeps them in check. But we are going to go with Indiana moving on. And in this case, the semifinal matchup is probably going to be between Texas Tech and Oregon. I don't think JMU can pull off that upset win against the Ducks, but strange things can happen. But between Texas Tech and Oregon, two different kinds of teams. Obviously, with Oregon, it would be a rematch of that game earlier on in the season at Autzen, which Indiana did end up winning by 10 points, but Indiana was in control for most of that game. It was probably Mendoza's. I don't know if it was his worst game, but it wasn't one of his best games, including that pick six that made it a tie game and had Oregon possibly in control of the game for a split second. But Mendoza's been very calm, cool, collected under pressure. We saw it in the Oregon game. We saw it in the Penn State game. We saw it in the Ohio State game. If he's able to stay calm like he has all season, I don't think there's any way Oregon would be able to avenge that loss. But it is hard to beat the same team twice. So maybe that gives them some questions. And then Texas Tech probably going to be the best defense that they have seen to this point in terms of just forcing turnovers. Jacob Rodriguez, arguably the best player in college football, probably should have been in New York competing for that Heisman Trophy, but Texas Tech offense has been inconsistent at times. Baron Morton needs to play his best possible game and comparable to not Alberto Mendoza, to Fernando Mendoza's game. And if he's able to do that, then Texas Tech may be able to hang in this game if it's low scoring like Ohio State was able to. But at the end of the day, I still think Indiana's probably the more solid team of these two.
Yeah, both of these teams I think will be tough matchups for Indiana just because they have really solid defenses. I think it will be somewhat reminiscent of that game against Ohio State, although neither defense is as good as the Buckeyes, so probably a few more points in this one. Both teams somewhere in the 20s would be my guess. But I think Connor hit most of the major points. These are both difficult matchups. Texas Tech, a very balanced team, good offensively and defensively. Oregon, more of an offensive threat, with still a great defense. I still think Indiana wins both of these games if they make it to the semifinals, but both, in my opinion, would be decided by around one score. That being said, very likely in my mind that the Hoosiers do make it to the national championship, where they could be facing any one of these six teams. Now, it's kind of hard to go just with all six of them and talk about each game. So realistically, I think this comes down to Ohio State or Georgia. If Indiana is playing Georgia, I think that Georgia has a very solid defense. Not as worried about Georgia's offense this season. With the way Indiana plays defense, I do think they'll slow them down quite a bit. I think the Hoosiers would be favored in this game. It's really just a lot of the same thing because you're playing a good defensive team. You are going to need to continue to play the balanced offense that you have all season long. They did it in both of the big games earlier on. I don't think Kurt Cignetti will get distracted. But at the same time, Georgia has experience in the national championship. Indiana has been nowhere near a stage as big as the national championship before, and most of their fans barely even remember the last time that they were in a national championship. So I think that this would be a very difficult game in that sense, but Indiana, in my mind, is the better team. Now, if it comes to a rematch with Ohio State, this is where I think Indiana would see some problems. If you're Indiana, you're rooting for the Bulldogs. Ohio State has a very, very good team, as Indiana knows from the first time they played. But the Buckeyes didn't play their best game in that one. We saw them miss the game tying field goal. There's just a lot of things here where it feels like Ohio State would be the favorites in a rematch. Indiana's going to have to do the same things they did before, limit offense, and hope that Ohio State makes mistakes with which this much time to prepare and the fact that Ryan Day and this Buckeyes team was here last season, I think it would still be a very tall task for Indiana to beat the Buckeyes.
Like Jonah has already mentioned, I think Indiana's more favorable matchup would be against Georgia, surprisingly, even though Georgia has been pretty dominant in the month of November, holding their last four opponents to 10 points or less. And that includes Alabama and Texas. But the problem with Georgia is, yes, their run game is, or sorry, not their run game. Their run defense is very, very strong, one of the best in the country, comparable to actually Indiana and Ohio State's run defense. Their issue has been their pass defense, and they have allowed a lot of big plays. So if Fernando Mendoza can lean more on his passing capabilities rather than going more to the ground game, then Indiana can have a very favorable matchup against the Bulldogs here. But like Jonas said, a rematch with Ohio State is going to be a really tough one because I think Ohio State would have learned so much from that earlier loss, and it's going to be at a more neutral site in this case instead of being at Indianapolis, which obviously gives Indiana a little bit more of a home field advantage in the Big Ten championship game. But Indiana is the number one team in the country for a reason. They have been tested. They have the team capable of winning a national championship. It's just, can you put it all together in such a fast turnaround? I think Kirk Cignetti and this team can do it. Just a matter of will they. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more of our content, and we will see you in the next video.